This episode of Tekzilla is brought to you by Citrix ShareFile.
JJ writes in, Tekzilla, where can I find a CPU socket 1150, an Intel Core i7 that does not have internal graphics built in? I've looked at Newegg, nothing. I don't want to pay for graphics I am not going to use. Keep up the great show. Thank you for all your help, JJ. Well, thank you, JJ. And I got to say, JJ's question and the crazy pile of announcements from Computex last week really seemed like a great excuse to get PCPer's Ryan Shrout back on Tekzilla. Ryan, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I got to ask, except for like Xeon server type CPUs, are you pretty much getting graphics with any CPU you buy these days?
It's pretty close. Intel has a series of processors that anything that ended with a P, like I think one was the 4330P, it was like a Core i5 part. It was a quad-core non-hyper-threaded processor that had the graphics disabled on it. But all the processors, you know, AMD APUs, Intel CPUs, they all have graphics on die, right? So you're gonna be hard pressed to find a processor nowadays. If you get into the AMD FX series, you can do that. Like you mentioned, the Xeon series will be like that. You know, at this point, you can kind of conclude that the graphics is free. So I know he says he doesn't want to pay for graphics he's not going to use, and I think that's very, very common, right? People are buying an Intel processor and they're using a discrete graphics card with it anyway. So I don't think it's much to worry about, and I don't think you're going to save a whole lot of money either way.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when you're buying an HDTV, you're getting 3D whether you want it or not on most boxes. It's a checkbox feature. They built it in, deal with it. Computex last week, what were the biggest announcements for you from Computex?
I think maybe the most impressive thing out of Computex was the re-emphasis on display technologies. We saw 4K monitors kind of from all different avenues. We saw 4K monitors at 60 hertz, which was great. We saw G-Sync monitors. We saw 4K G-Sync monitors, all these displays with variable refresh rates. We saw AMD kind of demo that FreeSync technology, the competitor to NVIDIA G-Sync, and the re-emphasis on monitors and what that means for gamers and enthusiasts and just professional users, I think was really, really good to see, because that's something that hasn't really changed dramatically in a long time.
So I was looking up the PCPer leaderboard earlier today. AMD A10 7700K APU. That's kind of like that's your favorite entry-level CPU right now. Well, I should say APU, right? Because the graphics is so big a part of the deal on that processor.
Yeah, they don't want you to call it CPU. They want to call it APU. Yeah, I mean, that's still actually for the price you're looking at there, $400 and something. You get that, and then I think if you look at the discrete GPU that's attached to it, it's actually an R7 240, which allows you to do a dual graphics setup where, in this case, you would not be wasting the graphics portion of the APU. You'd actually kind of be running them in conjunction together. They would be working together to improve frame rates. Now, it's still not going to be as good as even a moderately priced discrete card. Right. But if you're trying to keep that budget low, you maybe start with just the APU now and add in that card a little bit later.
When you were like, if you were thinking like, okay, I'm going to get a 750 Ti GPU, it's like the $150 GPU right now. Would that AMD be, if you were going to build up with like a 750 Ti, would you still build with an AMD, or would you go with an Intel CPU at that point?
It's at that point, it's really kind of equidistant on both sides of that, right? So I mean, the 7700K is still going to be a fine quad-core processor for compute, just your normal everyday CPU work. I think a lot of people would maybe even go to, we did a build recently that was like $500 to $600 that used the 750 Ti, and it had like a Pentium G3220, I think, which was actually a dual core processor competing against a quad core AMD processor, and they were much closer in performance, I think, than most people expected. Wow. There are a lot of options. Once you decide on your discrete versus integrated, if you're trying to build a super budget machine, there are a lot of avenues you can take, right? So you can go back to the Athlon processors, which are new technology, old brand, and then, or you can use the Pentium processors, which are new technology, old brand as well. Seems to be what these guys are using that for. It's
kind of funny. It's been so terrible, right? Because we think of Atom processors, or if we think of the Pentium processors, we think of ancient technology. But the reality is they're basically using the same tech as the latest, like Haswell Core i3, Core i5s, Core i7s.
Yep, correct.
Don't be confused. Pentium is essentially Haswell, which is essentially the good stuff. Yep. Go figure. Hey, what's up with the Devil's Canyon, the Core i7 4790?
This is an interesting part, actually. It is the same Haswell architecture. It's the exact same core and all that as the 4770K, for example. But what they changed with this is they changed the thermal interface material between the die and the heat spreader. So if you look at a processor, what you see is the heat spreader. You're not actually seeing the chip. The interface, the kind of the material they use between that, they changed with this. They went to they call a next generation polymer thermal interface material, which basically just improves the transfer of heat from that core to the heat spreader. And they also added some capacitors to the back of the processor to help kind of smooth out power delivery. The result is that while the 4770K sells for $340 today with a base clock of 3.5 gigahertz, this part sells at the exact same price. Well, it will in a couple of weeks when it comes out, but it will sell the exact same price at 4 gigahertz. So you're getting a 500 megahertz performance increase, clock speed increase at both base and turbo speeds for the same socket for the same price. And it's we posted a review on it at PC Perspective, and you know, overclocking didn't really seem to change very much. But if you're just a person that I have kind of become, which is, you know, I'm going to buy this processor, I'm going to build a system, I'm just going to put it in and make it work. You're getting 500 megahertz additional clock speed for, I think, 4 watts of TDP difference and the same price when it comes out. That's
a good deal. I mean, in terms of real world differences on, say, gaming, is there much of a measurable difference when you go up 500 hertz on a processor, on a you know, 3.6 gigahertz processor?
I would say in gaming is probably one of those instances where that difference will show up the least. Right. In our kind of CPU-based benchmarks, we saw anywhere from 7 to 14% performance improvement with that, but that's looking at video encoding or video transcoding, you know, 3D rendering, some of those things that are very multi-threaded and very CPU compute intensive. Gaming, you'll probably see a little bit. If you're doing multi-GPU gaming, you maybe see a little bit more, but in reality, for almost all games, with the exception of just a handful, they are still GPU limited.
It's funny you should mention video transcoding. So we've got a question about building a Plex server on the cheap that does video transcoding later in the show. And we were talking before we started recording, and you mentioned that you'd figured out how to redline a 20-core machine.
20-core, 40-thread. Yeah, we know how to do that now. Not on purpose, but for production purposes, we know now.
A little bit of video transcoding can just make everything complicated. So, big announcement, sort of a random announcement earlier this summer. Broadwell, the tick to Haswell's talk, the 14-nanometer process jumped down for 22-nanometer. Supposed to ship in time for holiday shopping. Should folks wait? And what's this going to show up first? Laptops or desktops or both?
They haven't really confirmed either way. I am thinking that it's going to show up in laptops first, right? So they said they're going to have chips or processors selling in systems by the holidays. So my expectation is that you'll see notebooks, ultrabooks for sale at, you know, Best Buy, Fry's, whatever, in time for Christmas, maybe in time for Thanksgiving. I don't think we'll see desktop replaceable, you know, DIY parts until early part of 2015. Just a guess, but I think that's a pretty good guess. So for somebody who's looking to build a system now, especially after just talking about what Devil's Canyon is, right? The 4790K. If I were building a system today and I wanted it to last for a while, that's the part I would use. And I don't really, you know, the main changes for Broadwell are going to be lower power consumption and increased kind of integrated graphics performance again. And if you're using a discrete card, you know, you're not really going to see that benefit.
Good point. One last thing before we go. Crucial MX100 2.5-inch SSD full review, 16-nanometer flash. Is this the sort of 500 gigabyte drive to beat right now for an SSD? And you should probably lead with the price on that.
Yeah, I think it definitely is, right? So that MX100, we saw the 512 gig model selling for $199 the week of its release, which is like 38 cents per gig, something like that, which is ridiculously inexpensive for an SSD. And it's not the best performer, but it's a really good performer as well. So I think we found like the 256 gig version for like $110. And then for $199, you get 512 gigs. And that's 512 gigs is, I think, you know, especially for a laptop and maybe for a lot of desktop users, that's the drive you need, right? You can leave your games installed. You don't have to worry about moving things back and forth quite as often. And for that price, it's the part to beat right now. It kind of supplanted the Samsung 840 EVO for me.
So we'll see if Samsung maybe drops the price just for the joy of it.
Yeah.
What's coming up on PCPer this week? PCPer.com.
We just posted our Devil's Canyon 4790K review, and I also have a review probably going up this week, definitely going up this week, of this card, which is a GeForce GTX Titan Z.
Ooh.
So this is a $3,000 dual GPU video card, so we're very curious to see how it compares to like the R9 295 X2 as well. And then we also have another PCI Express SSD from OCZ that's getting a review published up this week as well.
Ryan, thank you so much for making the time to join us. Ladies and gentlemen, in case they didn't say it enough, PCPer.com, from the budget to the budget buster, they've got great information. You should go there today. Thank you again, Ryan.
Thanks.
Coming up next, well, viewer questions. But first, let's take a moment to thank one of our sponsors. People, information is the lifeblood of business. Contracts, spreadsheets, invoices, business files. They're critical, and all too often they're just lobbed out on the internet, regular email attachments with no reliable means to ensure they've been received or reviewed. You lose control the moment you hit send, and that's why you need Citrix ShareFile, the easy-to-use business tool for sending, receiving, and sharing files. ShareFile sends your attachments as secure links. No ridiculous file size limits based on your email server. Yes, that giant Beta OS file, ShareFile, made it easy for me to share it with the whole team. And your files are under your control. You decide who has access to your files and for how long. If our producer leaves, we can lock him out of our files now. You get notifications telling you who opens your files and when, and you can password protect files for optimal security. Citrix ShareFile mobile apps means you can access your files anywhere, anytime, and you can sign up today for my 30-day free trial. No obligation. Go to sharefile.com, click the microphone at the top of the homepage, and enter Tekzilla. Remember, sharefile.com and type in Tekzilla. Get yourself a free trial.